Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining me tonight on Spanning the Knee. I am Anthony Spano. My guest tonight, Mahoning County Court Judge Morgan. I'm talking about life and politics. Oh, no, I should say court, not politics.
Yeah,
We want to make sure
that's
we're
right.
clear on that. I apologize. Judge, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me tonight.
Hey, thanks for having me, Anthony. It's my pleasure.
Let's start a little bit about kind of how you got started, how you kind of where you kind of all the way up until where we are now. Kind of give us a little bit background about yourself, what you've done in the past to get where you are now as Mahoning County Court Judge.
Okay, hey, so for those that don't know me or haven't heard this already, I was born in East Liverpool, Ohio, just down on the Ohio River there. My family had a furniture business, and it was in business for over 100 years down there. And when the steel went out and the potteries went out, a lot of the retail and the downtown went out. So my dad was forced to kind of move and find work, and he took a job up here in Youngstown working for Goldstein's Furniture. So we moved up here. I think it was between my 7th and 8th grade year, so I was probably 12 or 13 years old. Went to Mineral Ridge High School and graduated from there. So after that, I went to the University of Akron, studied political science, criminal justice. I've always wanted to be a lawyer as long as I can remember. And it's just one of those things that I think God just puts in your blood and just gives you the direction. Went to law school after that at Ohio Northern University, and upon graduation, my wife and I, both of us are from this area. My wife's actually born and raised in Sebring, where I sit on the bench, and yeah, we wanted to come back and be with our family and raise a family here.
Well, I have to ask this question because I ask it to everyone that's on my podcast. Is why do you want to be I mean, with everything going on right now, politics, court, everything, what makes you want to be judge?
Well, so I've been practicing law for 18 years and primarily doing criminal law, family law, domestic relations, those kind of things. And so I have seen over that 18-year period how a good judge can make a situation a lot better. How a judge that understands what options are available to people, that has the correct amount of compassion versus the correct amount of applying the law fairly and equitably. And so when the opportunity presented itself, I really didn't have it in my plans anytime in the near future. About 2.5 years ago when I first ran, there just became an opening at a county court. And county courts, for those that are watching that don't know, those are part-time courts. And I would never, at least at this point in my career, would not want to leave the practice of law. I love being a lawyer. I love being in court. I love litigating. And so when that opened up, I said, you know what, this is an opportunity to kind of step into what I've always eventually wanted to do, but yet still maintain my status as a lawyer, practicing attorney.
Well, let's talk about that court. The court is located in Sebring, Ohio, pretty much kind of the southwest corner of the county. Can you talk about what areas that court covers?
Yeah, so it's geographically very, very large. So we border on the Canfield Court and the Austintown Court. So we have everything from those two courts west. When you go up north, I think we hit right at the Ellsworth Township line. You come down, you have Greene and Goshen and Smith and Beloit, all of those townships, and we run right up against Canfield Township. And then on the south, I believe it's Beaver Township that we hit. So from a land perspective, it's very, very big.
And so if you're in those areas, you would be voting for Sebring, the Mahoning County Court Judge, correct? Sebring.
No, so actually, all of the townships in Mahoning County, with a few exceptions, vote for your Mahoning County Court Judge. Okay. Because the county court system, there's four courts. There's one in Austintown, one in Boardman, one in Canfield, and one in Sebring. We all govern different geographic areas, But when you're elected by that entire district, and you serve a term. So while I may be the judge now in Sebring, in a year I could be assigned to a different court, and we'll oftentimes sit in those other courts. So if Judge Hunter is, he's going to take a week's vacation, or Judge Hauser or Judge Johnson, one of the other judges we would fill in there. So you're really running to fulfill a term.
Well, it's good so people kind of understand kind of the area, as well as kind of how the courts work in that kind of perspective. What kind of cases does your court handle in Sebring?
Okay, so to make it easy to understand, you remember the show Night Court back in the 80s?
Pretty much, yeah. Okay, I think everyone does that are above a certain age.
There are days when it's like that. It's very fast paced. You'll have, I'll have something as simple as a speeding ticket defendant that'll come before me, and it might be an older lady, a younger woman, or a young man, and they are scared to death. Never been in court in their life. You can see it in their eyes, in their face, and their lips are trembling, and you kind of walk them through that, and it's interesting. And then the very next case that I hear literally could be a very high degree felony, felony all the way up to felony 1. Now, we're not a court of final jurisdiction on felonies, but the felonies that occur in my jurisdiction or in my court's jurisdiction, they will sometimes go and filter through our court. So, we hear everything: DUI, theft cases. We hear landlord tenant. We do evictions. We do the big stuff. We do contracts. A lot of credit card cases get filed in our courts. So you have to have a very broad understanding of a lot of different areas of the law and be able to shift gears really quickly.
Let's talk about some of those. What are some of the hardest cases to kind of judge in your area?
So the most difficult ones for me are the ones that involve family. There's a lot of domestic violence that goes on, and I think part of the reason for that is when that it's a specialized victims crime. So it's like an assault. So if you and I got into a fight, Anthony, and I punch you first, that's an assault. But if you're my brother, or you're my cousin, or you're a household member, then it becomes domestic violence. And so those are the most difficult for me, because I sometimes have to do things, at least initially, that are very difficult. I've had cases where, they come in on a domestic violence, and either the husband or wife are charged, and whoever's charged, I typically, and it's pretty much a policy of all the courts in this area, is that person is not allowed to go back in that house. That person's not allowed to see the family or household members. So I sometimes have to separate, a father from his wife and children, or a mother from her husband and children. And you can see that, they'll come to me and they'll say, we really want him home, or we want her home. And we have a domestic violence advocate that helps us interview those and make sure that they're safe situations. But, it bothers me to do those kinds of things. And I worry, am I sending someone back into that house that's going to maybe do worse harm this time? So those are difficult. The other ones that really get me are the multiple offender OVIs. My kids are out on these roads. My family are out on these roads. And, when someone comes to me and they're on their 5th or 6th OVI, and they want driving privileges, and, it just, those are the ones you agonize over, because you want them to go to work. You want them to go to treatment, but you don't want them in that weapon where if, they're under the influence of alcohol, they're going to hurt or kill somebody.
Yeah. And we've heard stories of people that have, like, all over the country, 10 OVIs, or, it just, you hear these stories and it's like, how much more can someone take?
Yeah. And I've had them. I've had persons in my court that have had 7, 8, or 9. Now, I didn't hear the previous 7, 8, or 9.
Yeah.
There's a reset on those when you get up to like 7, 8, or 9. The look back periods, sometimes you can only go back 10 years. Sometimes you can go back 20. But the look back periods change, but on those.
Yeah, that's an interesting, just kind of the way that all falls into place on how
Mhm.
those work. Well, now let's talk about kind of how has your court been dealing with the pandemic? I mean, I know people are saying, "Hey, I'm not much going on anymore due to either people staying home, businesses staying closed." What has your court done particularly to kind of help either during the pandemic or kind of how you've been dealing with it going forward since March?
So the courts, we never shut down. We're an essential service. We did not shut down, and so there were cases even at the very beginning of this when nobody really knew exactly to the extent of what was going to happen. We were very worried about. We didn't know how the virus is going to spread, and were hospitals going to be overrun and those kind of things. But what the Supreme Court and the state legislature and the governor did was they told speedy trial. And so they gave us the ability to not hear cases that didn't necessarily need to be heard right away. Now, obviously, if someone is incarcerated, their right to freedom is being infringed upon. Their right to speedy trial is very, very important to me, and I want to have that hearing. And we would do those essential ones. But primarily what we did is we slowed way down. We put some cases off to the side and we said, okay, this one can wait, this one can wait, this one can wait. And we heard the essential ones. And we adhered to the CDC guidelines and the state guidelines on the number of people that would be in our court. It's interesting. The week before COVID hit, it hit on a Thursdays when everybody started talking about, oh my goodness, this is shutting down, that's shutting down. And I remember I was sitting in my court. And I always have my cell phone, and it's always sitting right there. And I just kept. It was like sitting there, and it was just going all these pop-ups from WFMJ, WKBN, all those, and it was saying this is closing, Pennsylvania's closing, this is closing. And then I'm looking out of my courtroom, and I see all these people, and I'm thinking, how in the world are we going to do this? And so the very next week we came in, and we had taken all the chairs out with the exception of some small ones. We were having people come in the building one at a time, taking their temperature, obviously asking them questions about they feeling okay, those kind of things. And so all of that to say, then we eventually just inched back in, and we applied for a grant to the Supreme Court of Ohio, and we got I don't remember the exact amount. I want to say it was close to $50,000. And so every one of our county courts got a very, very nice virtual web program with a flat screen, the Cisco WebEx programming, which is the most secure programming. We were able to put one of those units down at the county jail. And so that helped us not have to transport those prisoners out to Sebring. Because what they were having to do at the very beginning is they were putting one prisoner in each cruiser. So if you imagine seven or eight defendants, they're bringing 7 or 8, sheriff's deputy vehicles out. And so it was just a huge tax on the resources of our sheriff's department and our county. And so that was great that we were able to get those. We did a lot of telephone arraignments. Which was something that was never done prior to the COVID outbreak. And so we had to figure out how to do that. How do we make sure that the person on the other end of the phone is the actual defendant? How do we make sure that they understand what it is that we have to explain to them as judges? And so it was a learning process. We developed some forms that helped us do it quicker. One of the things that you do when you have a court like mine is you go in, the very first thing you do is you say, this is how court's going to run. And you tell everybody what's going on. You tell people what the difference between a guilty and not guilty and a no contest plea is. And if someone pleads guilty, you go through all of their waiver of rights. And so you can do that once when you've got 50 people in the gallery. When you're calling people, you have to do it with every single person. And so you just had to learn, we just had to learn how to do that quickly and efficiently and effectively.
And I think it probably saved a lot of money transporting them back and forth from the county jail in downtown Youngstown to Sebring,
Oh,
correct?
yeah, the video arraignments, I think, really helped in terms of saving the county money and becoming more efficient, without a doubt.
Yeah, I can tell that's not a short drive.
I tell people it's a long way from everywhere in the county.
Yeah, that is it. And let's talk about some of that. What have you learned from during this pandemic that you can do moving forward?
So,
Like, what plans would you now put moving forward with all that and kind of what you've learned in the past? Like, what would be that in the future? Kind of your 2, 3, 4 year.
I think we're ready. If there is another, and I know we're going through another spike right now. I think the numbers are the highest they've ever been. I want to say there was 3,000 cases.
They were 4,000, I think, in Friday. Like,
yeah,
they were well over that. That's absurd.
3 or 4,000 today. And if you remember back when this thing was first hitting, it was like 1,000. You thought was a really high number. So we're spiking again. And so if there needs to be, if we need to reimpose some of the restrictions that we did, we are much more prepared this time. So what we did was of the 2 video conference units we had, we put one in the courtroom, and we actually put one in a separate area of the court. So we can actually house people in 2 different areas, so we can kind of stage them. So when defendants are ready to come in, we can put 5 in the courtroom, and we can put 5 out in the lobby, and then we've got that one remote unit. And so I can bounce from the person that's in front of me to the video screen right here, and it just helps that get through quicker, and there's less interaction between large groups of people. So that's good. The other thing that we got approved for a grant through Governor DeWine, and we don't quite have the equipment yet. When this whole thing happened, webcams and computers and all that stuff just was.
Now it's all on back order.
Right. And so we got a bunch of iPads. And what we plan on doing with those iPads is being able to do remote probation appointments so that probationers don't necessarily have to come in the building every single time, but the probation officer can see them because that's part of the problem. Right now, we're doing a lot of telephone reporting, and our probation officers have to be pretty keen and pretty, they have to be aware of what's going on because that person's not sitting there right in front of them. So that with our civil hearings, I haven't quite got this going yet, but we have the technology, and that is to do remote pretrials with lawyers. So oftentimes we'll have a lawyer coming in from Cleveland or Akron, and there might be one coming in from Dayton, or they might have local counsel. I would love, because typically civil pretrials are just the lawyers, I would love to be doing something just like this. They're at their office, we're here, we're able to talk, we're on the record. I can go through what discovery needs to be completed, all of that stuff, and save them the trip, save them the potential exposure, and not have as many people coming into the court. So if the pandemic did nothing good, it did a little bit of good, and it made us become more technologically aware of how we can do things better in that way.
Well, and it's funny because you can record these and actually transcribe them.
Yeah.
And there's the software out there to do it. So, or an individual that normally would do that in the court can do that as well. So that does help. Mm-hmm. What have you seen? You've been in office for about 2 years, like you mentioned earlier, give or take.
About 20 months. Going on 2.
Yeah. What are some of the things you'd like to do moving forward, 3, 4 years down the road, that once we're kind of hopefully back to normal in a short period of time? Some people say by Wednesday we'll be back to normal, or spring of 2021. What would you look for moving forward down the future?
So the biggest thing that I see with our courts, and what you try to do as a judge is you try to redirect behavior. You try to keep people from coming back. So the word, we use the term recidivism. How do we keep this person from reoffending and ending up back in our court? The biggest problem we have, hands down, every probation officer, every judge, every prosecutor will tell you is drugs. Drugs are somehow involved in a majority of the crimes that come before us. And so getting folks into treatment is my primary objective, getting them into the right kind of treatment, and then also having the proper oversight. And I say this all the time, any judge can hand down a sentence and say, okay, I'm going to put you on 12 months probation, go get a drug and alcohol assessment. And if I never see or hear from you again, that means you're probably doing okay. Well, that's not good enough for me. I want to see them personally. And I learned this from Judge Geisigam and Judge Ivanchek when I was a public defender in their court for over 10 years. I saw how when that judge said, okay, here's your sentence. I am giving you probation. I'm not going to put you in jail, but you're going to go get this assessment. You're going to get it done within the next 30 days. And I want you to come back and you're going to tell me exactly what you're involved in, how you think it's going, how do you like it, and what are your prospects going forward. And so, as a defense attorney, telling them like, look, if you don't get this done, when you come back in, that judge is not going to be happy with you, and he may put you in jail. And it spurred people along. It really did. Not that probation officers aren't tough guys or gals, but it's certainly a lot different when they know they have to come in and talk to the guy in the robe, and that I have the ability right there, right now to say, you're not following my orders, you're not doing what you're supposed to do, I'm putting you in jail. So I want to continue doing that. The other things is we have Judge DeSalvo and I at Youngstown Municipal Court. We're not the only courts doing it, but we're the ones that I think have sank our teeth into it, is license recovery programs. You would not believe how many people drive without a valid license or a suspended license. And part of the reason is they get caught in this BMV system that is, in my opinion, it's just a huge tax on the poor. They get hit with reinstatement fees that are just absurd, and then they can never get out. And so what I try to do is I do everything I can do within my power to help them get valid. And if they're not motivated to get valid, then I get them motivated by saying, well, if you don't get valid, then the next time we catch you doing this, you're going to be in jail. And so you use that hammer, with drug addicts, you use it with other people to try and redirect them to become more law-abiding citizens.
Well, and let's talk about that. That's a good segue. How do you balance when you talk about you want to see these guys follow up, do what they're supposed to do? How do you kind of balance justice and mercy when delivering or talking with some of these defendants or essentials that are coming into your court?
Well, I usually go by the old adage, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. And you could kind of tell, you do get a feel for certain defendants. You see their posture. You see how they are handling themselves. Maybe after they plead and you read what happened in the police report, you see that they're not getting it. And so you get a feel for who needs to have that little extra bit of punishment. I was telling you about, like, sometimes you'll see someone come in and they're on their first speeding ticket and they're 45 years old and they're about in tears. There's nothing more I could do to punish that person. They pretty much punished themselves. So you can see it, you can read it a lot in their eyes. And that's part of that is, I think the reason I can do that well is because I've been in county courts and municipal courts my entire career. And so you learn to get a feel for certain cases, certain types of people, and how they're interacting. So I'm a mercy guy when I feel like you're trying to better yourself. I really am. But I have no problem sticking somebody in jail when I feel like they've been thwarting their nose and thumb at the system, and they need to go. And I mean, I just did this a couple weeks ago. I stuck a guy in jail for 90 days. I felt like that's what he needed. So it's an interesting thing. I don't know how if there's a formula for it, but you do certainly learn to have a feel for it.
Well, and I can only imagine sitting in that seat with what you guys go through and kind of some of the things that you look for or look at when you're dealing with these cases. So
Mhm.
I don't envy you at all.
Well, I signed up for it. Those are the tough parts. There's success stories too, Anthony. I mean, uh, I've had family members come up to me of defendants that were before me, and I was the first one that was able to kind of steer them into treatment. And they say thank you for taking the time, thank you for paying attention, thank you for following up. It's made a difference in their life. This is the first time we've ever seen this person actually engaging there. So there's when you get those kind of stories back, it makes it all worth it.
Yeah. Well, and let's talk a little bit about that. You kind of like you talked a little bit about earlier. You're you've been around this area pretty much your whole life in Mineral Ridge and in the courts area. What have you learned about Youngstown from judging in this region in general?
Um, people. It's a big geographic area, and you get a wide variety of people, even in the county courts. The type of defendant you might get in Boardman's going to be very different than maybe the one you get out in Sebring. But we're good people here. I think we have a general sense of what's right and wrong. There are, obviously, our area is ravaged by drugs, and that's something that I think is a little bit different with our area. I don't know that other areas are suffering as bad as we are, and part of that is because we've had a our economy is not spectacular here. There's a lot of unemployment, so we deal with that. But in general, I find I do a lot of civil cases, a lot of evictions. Where someone might be suing somebody for this. And what I've found is if you bring these folks in at a pretrial and you say, how far off are you? What are your main issues? What are your main issues? And you start getting people to talk to each other, and instead of talking over or around each other, they will concede a lot of things. They'll agree, and you can get them to where it's a decision that everybody agrees to, and it's good for everybody. So.
Yeah, and I know now we've been in the pandemic, and this is a good. I actually want to talk about this because I don't know if this is. You may know this in the court system, as you know there's been high depression, a lot of overdoses in our area. We've also had a lot of drugs in the Mahoning Valley, as people like to say it. Back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, this was a huge mob area. We were between Chicago and New York, same as drugs. Now they're talking about that we're in the middle. What has been the biggest that you've seen? Has it been drugs? Has it been overdoses? What have you seen in the courts? Maybe not at your court, but just in general that you're seeing that shouldn't be good right now.
Well, opiates, the heroines and the oxycodone, those are just so hard for people to beat. Um, it, it's almost insurmountable if they get really far in. If you got a serious heroin addict, I tell them, like, you need 90 days inpatient. You need another 90 days after that where you're an intensive outpatient. And then it might not be a year, but a year before your brain chemistry actually gets back to normal and you start thinking logically. And they don't want to hear that. People don't want to put their life down and stop and just go focus on the drug treatment. So opiates are big in this area. Meth is really big out in the western counties. There's a lot of manufacturing of meth going on. We've actually had a couple of very large busts in the Smith Township, Sebring, Goshen area, where you wouldn't think that kind of stuff's going on, but it is. The other thing that I see with a lot of drug addicts is there's usually a dual diagnosis. So there's some sort of mental health there, whether it's bipolar, depression, high amount of anxiety, or they're a highly functioning person. And so, maybe they're put on some sort of depression medication or something. Medication's not working, or they start mixing in alcohol or drugs. And then, you've got a dual diagnosis problem. Not only are you dealing with the drug addict, in terms of his addiction or her addiction. You're dealing with, how do we deal with this person's mental health and getting them back into shape? Very, very difficult. Our mental health providers, if our community could know how hard of a job they have and what they have to do, it would, they'd give them a lot more credit, because it's difficult. So, and as you were back to your question with this pandemic, I don't know that we're going to see the full effect of it for a while. I think about, periodically you'll get a case of child abuse, and it's usually a teacher or some other, third party that ends up reporting the child abuse. With this lockdown and with maybe some kids not going to school, I would suspect that there's a lot of child abuse that's going along undetected. I would assume that there are addicts that have slipped back into it and it's going undetected because people are just not out and about, and they're in their house. We're doing a lot of telehealth now with the mental health counseling and the drug counseling. I'm not in that field, obviously, and I don't know how effective that could be, but I just have a feeling it's not as effective as that person actually coming in and sitting down with their mental health counselor and those kind of things. So the pandemic, we will be seeing, I think, effects from this very long term.
Yeah, I think we will. We just don't know what those are. I know, talking with some other professionals in either the health industry or even just in nonprofits, that we're starting to see the effects that the pandemic has brought out of this, from food security to healthcare to a lot of different things that we maybe have thought was a small problem, but at the same time now we know it's a huge problem.
Right.
And so I think that's a lot to offer just to people out there in general.
Mm-hmm.
So moving forward, what's next for the court? We've talked about the future, but kind of what's moving forward now in the next couple months, dealing with the pandemic, or even dealing with the election that everyone wants to be over, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, like I said, we've streamlined some of the things that we're doing. The other thing you should know, Anthony, is we've expanded our court times because the time that we were, like I told you, it takes a lot longer to do what we were doing before. And so with some poking and prodding of because our prosecutors have to bump around too, and so they're now taking time away from this court, or maybe they were spending time downtown at the prosecutor's office to prepare for cases. I'm keeping them at the court a lot longer. Our probation officers are at the court a lot longer. Our clerks are dealing with cases throughout the day, whereas previously they were only maybe doing hearings all morning, and then in the afternoon they could catch up. So it's becoming more taxing on everybody. But I've got a lot of buy-in from everybody. The other one is the sheriff's deputies. They're out there all day now. And, we start right at 8:30, and those guys usually aren't leaving until 4:30. And that's when we're getting done. And that's a long day for them, because after they're done with my court, they're transporting some of those prisoners, or the new prisoners, or if they're going to jail, back down there, and they've got to go through that whole booking process. So it becomes a long day for those guys. But we've learned to streamline court and to do it effectively and still safely. Whatever your opinion is on the pandemic or the coronavirus, some people will strut into court. They don't got a mask on. They get mad when you want to take their temperature, and they're like, "Oh, I'm just going in here for a minute. I got to pay my fine," or whether you're petrified that there's coronavirus around every corner. We have to, as a court, make it safe for people to come in. We're not somewhere where you can just say, "I don't want to go there." We're forcing them to come there, right? And so we've got to make it a safe place for them to be and to go in. Some people may have issues that make them more susceptible, or if they were to get sick, it's a serious situation for them. So the Chief Justice of the state of Ohio said, "Look, we still have to be on guard. We still have to be ready for whatever's coming our way." And I can tell you, our county courts are very prepared for this if it were to happen again.
That's good to know. And I appreciate you joining me tonight and out of your busy schedule. I know there's a lot going on. I want to get into one more question, and then we'll go into. I like to call it my five fun questions.
Fun for who? Fun for you, probably.
No, these are just normal fun questions. I don't know the answers. You should know them.
All right.
Let me back. And we talked about a lot of different stuffs about what are some of your principles that you've learned as a judge.
Obviously, a judge's primary objective is to follow the law, to understand the law, and to apply it appropriately. Now, that said, we are human beings, right? And every single human being, whether they know it or not, has a worldview. They have certain things, the way they were raised, or certain things that they believe that will affect maybe how we treat somebody or how we look at a particular case. And so the important thing for a judge to do is not necessarily to abandon those things, because in a way they're good. I mean, we were all taught growing up you shouldn't steal, right? Well, why shouldn't we steal? Well, because you're taking something that's not yours, it's somebody else's. Well, there's somebody that might say, I think stealing's fine. Survival of the fittest. If you're the biggest and baddest, go take it. Well, that's not right. So everybody brings a certain worldview to the table. The important thing for a judge to do is to be able to sift through when your worldview or how you've been raised or anything that makes up you as a person. You need to make sure that that's not inadvertently affecting the case in a negative way. And I'm talking about maybe bias. So everybody has a certain amount of bias. I mean, I think Australians all wear leather hats and look like Crocodile Dundee. Well, that's probably not true, right? I mean, there's probably Australians that don't look like Crocodile Dundee.
Maybe in Sydney.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never met any. So you just need to be able to understand where you might be having bias. And then if you feel that you can't judge a case appropriately, then you remove yourself. That's what any person would want, is for a judge, if he or she doesn't feel like they can judge a case fairly or appropriately, get off the case.
That's a good answer, and I'll leave it at that. I appreciate you taking time, and now we're asked my 5 famous questions.
All right.
Now this could be personal or professional, your choice.
All right.
Yeah, you might want to get that sip of water.
Mm-hmm. Grape juice.
Best accomplishment.
When I passed the bar, it was one of those moments that I remember sitting there when I learned the results and just almost internally just collapsing, but with joy. And so it was one of those things that you just work so hard. I mean, you start thinking about becoming a lawyer back in high school, and then you go through college, and then law school is just grueling. And then the bar exam is grueling. It's 3 days. It's a 3-day test. And you go down to Columbus to take it. And then you wait after you take the test for 2.5 months, 3 months before you get the results. And you don't know whether you're going to be a lawyer or not. And if you got to retake it, you got to wait till February. So that was one of those accomplishments that, I just look back on, and I think it's one of those benchmarks in my life.
Okay. I can only imagine. What's harder, the SAT or the bar?
The bar exam, without a doubt.
Best memory.
Boy, this could be personal or I've had tons of
professional.
Tons of memories with my family. I have, 6 children, my wife and I, and lots of great moments with them. I love being a coach with them. But one of the coolest things that I've done recently was when I was appointed by the governor to this position. It was, Governor DeWine, for whatever people might think of him. Some people love him. Some people, he's not their favorite. He is a kind man, and he took the time to. He invited me down to the governor's mansion. Went in, sat down, and this was when he was giving the appointment after all the interviews and everything. And we went into the living room there at the governor's mansion, and I didn't know if I was getting it or not. I didn't know why they were calling me down, frankly. And,
Punishment.
I thought it could maybe be like a third interview, like I had to make a closing argument or something. But he just sat there and talked with me, and asked me about myself, asked me about the family. We talked about the Canfield Fair, and then
Everyone
said,
knows that fair.
"Yeah, they do. They do."
Everyone does.
Mahoning County, and they're like Canfield Fair, yeah. But he looked at me and he says, "I'm going to give you the appointment to that position." And just sitting in a living room with the governor of the state of Ohio and having him bless me with that honor was something I'll never forget.
Okay. And it's funny because I don't care what governor you're from, what party. There's always people that are going to like you, and there's always people that are going to hate you. So no matter what you do, it's a hit or miss with whoever.
Right.
Best experience.
Whew.
Are these tougher questions than the other ones?
I don't know. No, best experience. I guess I don't know what you mean by that.
Best experience.
I would just say being a dad and being a coach. I told my wife, before I kind of got into this whole, I don't want to call it politics because I don't think judicial races and things are necessarily political. But before I got into all this, I coached 4 or 5 basketball teams and was really involved in that. And that's really taxing on you. I don't know if you have children, Anthony, but
they're coming.
Okay. Well, you'll know it's a blessing, and it's also going to make you get a lot of these gray hairs here. But yeah. But one of I guess the greatest experience I have is coaching my kids, and I miss it greatly, and I can't wait to get back to it.
Well, I referee high school basketball varsity, so I know exactly what you mean when it talks about the experience and how much time coaches and players put in.
You know what? I did not know that you are a referee. That is one of the toughest jobs. High school basketball.
High school varsity.
Wow. We just had our athletic sports meeting the other night. My kids go to Heartland Christian School, and our athletics
great
director.
Place.
Yeah, it is.
I know your athletic director very well.
Susie Shields.
She's a very nice lady.
She is, and so she was talking to us. She, before every sports starts, she has the meeting, and she calls the parents and says, "Here's what the expectations are." And she was talking the other night, and she said, "And everybody, I want you to know, you are not allowed to say a thing to the referees this year." we don't have very many. She goes, because I guess there's not a lot coming back. They're worried.
No, there is not. There is not very many basketball officials coming back. They're in dire need of them.
That's what she said.
Well, COVID's COVID's being a very deterrent of that, because football, everyone's outside, you're spread out. Now with basketball, we don't know what's going to happen.
Right. Well, she said there's not a lot of them, and that's another thing that could derail our season is if we give the refs a hard time and they quit. So don't quit on us.
I don't mind the hard time. I've been doing 17 years for basketball and 20 some years for other sports. I don't mind the coaches. I'm not going to lie, I kind of get amused from the fans and from the coaches. I know the coaches long enough that at the end of the day, we're still going to go out and get a bite to eat. You know what I mean? So, and I think that, it doesn't bother me. I have thick skin, but I enjoy the game because of the kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's it. And so you know what I'm talking about when you say that there's that joy and that experience. You brought up that question earlier about, you said about judging. You said, how do you know what's going on there in front of you? And I wish I'd have known you were a referee. I could have made that parallel at the time, because I think you probably can tell even if you don't directly see it, you might be watching the ball over there, but you know there's something going on underneath. There's some pushing and shoving, and you might need to
Oh
blow the
yeah, we
whistle
know.
to be settled down. But you learned that through experience. I mean, you said 17 years as a referee.
16, 17 years, yeah, of
Wow,
varsity.
that's
Yeah.
awesome.
So yeah, I know exactly what you mean, and I look forward to basketball season every year. Where can I
Mhm.
get? I like to say the joke, and I'll put this out. I get paid to exercise.
Yeah. No, what is
That's
it? November 22nd. We start this year.
uh, I don't know what they're gonna do. We'll have to figure it out. I think around that time, yeah.
Yeah. You got your schedule yet?
Oh yeah, I get my schedule about a year in advance.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So, and two more questions for you.
All
Your
right.
role model.
Jesus Christ, without a
Okay.
doubt.
Okay.
People always ask me why. They're like, "Oh, that's an easy one, whatever." Not really. Um, you think about that man, God, frankly, um, came to this earth and changed the trajectory of everything. Whether you believe in whether he was God or wasn't or whatever, or maybe you believe it's a fable, you can't deny the fact that that one person had a significant impact on the way this earth is, and I think he did so in a very positive way. And so I try and live my life as he did. Live with humility, um, be good to people, root out evil where you can, take care of the needy, take special care of the children, widows, and then he also forgave. There's we if we did a lot more forgiving in our nation and in our country, I think we would be in a lot better place.
Yeah. Agree to disagree.
Okay.
I try.
Yeah.
You know how it is, right?
Yep.
Especially what's going on right now. But that's your answer. There's nothing wrong with that. If there was one person you'd want to meet, past or present, who would it be and why?
Hmm. So I'm a student of history, and I love the founding of the United States and our founding fathers. You know, I don't know if people know this, but Sam Adams was I think he was the guy when it came to the founding of our country, and he'd be a guy I think that I'd want to meet. He had some skeletons in the closet from back when he was in Britain, and the king hated him, and he was bold enough to say, "We're going to start a country, and we're going to do it on the soil of the greatest country at the time, Britain, and we're going to fight them back and become independent." And so I'd love to just pick his brain for a couple hours and figure out how he did what he did and what he thought America might be, and then maybe be able to tell him a little bit of what it did become and see what he thinks.
Yeah, and I think the king hated everyone in this
Yeah,
country at that time.
yeah.
Well, Judge, it's always a pleasure. Stay
Thank
on
you.
after this. Everyone, thank you for visiting us tonight. Judge, always a pleasure. I wish you the best of luck. You're always welcome on my show, and we hope to see you in the future.
Hopefully, after a victory on Tuesday, I'll come back and we'll talk again. It's been fun.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. Check out for more podcast interviews. Go to anthonyvspano.com. Be safe. God bless. Have a great night.